Chapter 5. Claire was inputting the latest batch of patient notes when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway of the medical secretary's office. She blinked, wondering if her mind was playing tricks. But no, it was Lucinda Thompson, standing hesitantly on the threshold, a large white dressing covering the left side of her face, where the gash had been. She looked different, still thinner than when she'd worked in this office, but less diminished than when Claire had seen her at the cottage. Or was she imagining it? "Claire," Lucinda said under her breath. "Could I speak with you?" She beckoned for her to come out. Around Claire, there was a bustle of activity. Angela was on the phone. 2 other secretaries were discussing scheduling conflicts. No one paid attention to the visitor in the doorway. "Of course," she said, logging out of her computer. "Let me just tell someone I'm taking a break." A minute later, they walked down the corridor towards a small courtyard garden rarely used by staff. The air was crisp, the space deserted. "Your wound," Claire said, gesturing to the dressing. "I'm so glad you got it looked at." Lucinda touched the bandage. "Dr. Patel in A&E. She was very kind, asked a lot of questions." "I'm sure she did," Claire replied. "How have you been?" Lucinda looked all around the courtyard before gazing back at Claire. "David's dead." The words hung in the air between them. Claire kept her expression neutral, waiting. She didn't know what to say. "It didn't take long," Lucinda went on. "After you left, he finished his beer. We were about to start work, but he became, off. Said the room was spinning. Started sweating, couldn't sit still. I thought maybe the beer had gone bad." She stared past Claire, as though seeing it again. Then it got worse. His eyes were very strange, like the pupils had shrunk. He couldn't stop wiping his face. 10 minutes later, he was on the floor, shaking, choking, like he couldn't draw breath. I tried to help, but nothing I did made any difference. Claire shifted on the bench. She was beginning to feel the cold. Lucinda continued. "It was over inside a couple of hours. One moment he was raging at me to fetch water. The next he was gone. Sometimes I still hear it, the way he gasped for air. It was so fast." Claire suddenly realized Lucinda had stopped talking. "I'm sorry," she said. What else could she say? "Are you, though? It's odd, isn't it? You visit, and then he dies. Don't you think that's odd?" "I think that's odd." Claire sat very still. "What did the doctors say?" "Doctors?" Lucinda gave a snort that could have been a laugh. "I didn't call any doctors. I didn't call anyone." "You didn't report his death to anyone?" This was good news for her, wasn't it? She was less likely to get caught. Lucinda shook her head. "David always said not to trust authorities, that when the system collapsed, they'd be the first to turn on people like us." She lowered her voice. "Besides, he wasn't exactly registered as living there." "What did you do with?" "With his body. I buried him. Behind the cottage, past the vegetable garden. The ground was soft from the rain. Took me all night." She flexed her hands as if they ached from the unaccustomed activity. "Maybe deeper than necessary, but I didn't want to take the chance of wildlife digging him up." Lucinda's voice was so matter-of-fact. Claire swallowed. The practicalities of what would happen after David's death hadn't occurred to her until now. "I told myself it was shock, why I wasn't crying," Lucinda continued. "But the truth is, I felt free, for the first time in months." She leaned closer. "Is that terrible?" "No, it's not terrible at all." Lucinda pulled back and studied her face. "You understand, don't you, about men like David?" It wasn't a question. Claire thought of Cockwombledok, of the bronze hair, of the weightlifting from her shoulders. "Yes, I understand." They sat in silence for a moment, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. "But now," Lucinda said, "I'm alone out there, and I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Before David found me, another man came to the cottage. Said he was lost, needed directions." Lucinda fidgeted. Her fingers twisted the hem of her jacket. "He wasn't lost. He'd been watching me for days. If I hadn't had the shotgun." Claire visualized the isolation of the cottage, the single-track road, the cover given by the close-growing trees. "You're vulnerable out there." "David was right about some things," Lucinda said. "The systems are failing, the blackouts are getting longer. But I hadn't counted on." She broke off, shaking her head. "There are worse things than power outages. Like men who see a woman alone as an opportunity," Lucinda nodded. "I've reinforced the doors, set up alarms around the perimeter, dug pits on the approach paths and covered them. I sleep with the shotgun now." The image was stark. Lucinda alone in that cottage, booby-trapping the land around her like a medieval fortress, waiting for the next invader. "You can't go back there tonight," Claire said suddenly, the words surprising her. "Not alone." "I have to. Everything I have is there. Stay with me and Michelle, just for tonight." Claire leaned forward. "When did you last sleep properly, without listening for every twig snap or branch creak? Or empty tin cans rattling on their cord?" Lucinda said, trying to smile, but failing. Her shoulders sagged, as if the suggestion of uninterrupted rest had made her aware of her exhaustion. "It does sound good, though, but I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition. Michelle and I have been discussing preparation plans too. We could learn a lot from you. Figure out what to do next. Together." "Together," Lucinda repeated the word as if testing an unfamiliar concept. "Together," Claire repeated. "And maybe we can come up with a better solution than you living in constant fear, waiting for the next David to find you." Lucinda studied her, wariness and hope battling in her expression. "All right, just for tonight." The feeling of relief surprised Claire. The thought of Lucinda returning to that isolated cottage, vulnerable and alone, had been worrying, especially considering that Claire was the one who'd deprived Lucinda of her protector. Whatever else David had been, he'd presumably kept other predators at bay. "Good. I'll text Michelle so she knows to expect us." As she pulled out her mobile, Claire caught Lucinda staring at her reflection in her phone, at the dressing on her face. "Dr. Patel said if I'd left it much longer, the infection could have spread," Lucinda said quietly. "I might not have woken up one morning." Claire thought of the choices that had led them both here. Lucinda fleeing to isolation that had nearly killed her in more ways than one, Claire carrying poison in her bag day after day, both of them changing in ways they couldn't have imagined just a few years ago. "We should head back," Claire said, tucking her phone away. "I'll finish my shift, then we can go home together." Lucinda nodded, rising from the bench. "I'll wait in the cafeteria. Thank you for understanding." As they walked back towards the office, Claire glanced sideways at this woman who had buried a man with her bare hands, who had fortified her home against invaders, who had seen the world changing before anyone else. Lucinda wasn't the only one who needed protection. They all did, in different ways. And perhaps, Claire thought, the old saying was right. There was safety in numbers. Especially when those numbers were women. Behind the glass wall of his office, Mercer worked diligently at his computer, still the model of professional behavior. Claire watched him for a moment, wondering how long his performance would last, and whether, when it inevitably faltered, he would find himself facing not just one woman, but three. The evening stretched late, as the three women sat around Michelle's kitchen table, mugs of tea gone cold as they talked through options. "The cottage has better natural defenses," Lucinda explained, sketching a rough map on a notepad. "But it's isolated, with no reception, if something happens or if other men come along." "The town has resources too," Michelle said. "It's easier to get supplies, for as long as they last anyway. And it's easier to protect the house here, surrounded as it is by other houses, other people." Claire studied the list they'd compiled, advantages and disadvantages of each location. Neither was perfect. Both had vulnerabilities. "What if we don't choose?" she asked. "What if we use both?" The others looked at her. "Think about it. We're three women. That's enough to ensure no location is ever left completely unattended, but also that no one is ever alone in the cottage. It's safer to be here alone than there." Lucinda's frown disappeared. "What a good idea. A rotation." "Exactly. 2 at the cottage, 1 here, switching regularly." "But not in a predictable pattern," Michelle said, "so that no one watching could work out when someone might be vulnerable." They spent the next hour working out logistics, transport, communication signals, emergency protocols. "We need to do it so we can still earn money, though," Michelle pointed out, "for as long as the system holds, for supplies, information." Claire knew Michelle lived off independent means of some sort. She'd never asked what they were. "The hospital's desperate for staff," she said. "Lucinda, they'd take you back in a heartbeat." "Medical secretary by day, survivalist by night," Lucinda smiled. "Never thought I'd go back, but I'd be happy to now." "Just until things change," Claire said. "Having all 3 of us on the lookout for trends and signs as to what's happening will help to let us know when it's time to retreat permanently. As the plan took shape, Claire felt something she hadn't recognized for too long. It was hope. Not that the world would improve, but that they might navigate its deterioration better prepared. Over the next weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Michelle's house, solid Victorian brick with sturdy doors, required fewer modifications than Claire had expected. They reinforced windows, installed additional locks, created hidden storage spaces for supplies. At Lucinda's cottage, Claire learned skills she'd never imagined needing: how to set tripwires, how to purify water, how to maintain a garden that provided real sustenance rather than merely decoration. How to shoot a gun, although that still terrified her and she hoped she'd never have to do that. The rotation system worked well. Sometimes Claire and Michelle stayed at the cottage while Lucinda was stationed at the townhouse. Sometimes Claire and Lucinda took the cottage shift, leaving Michelle in town. They developed a shorthand, an unspoken language, some of it in sign. Knowledge of the location of weapons, emergency plans, signals. Claire found herself sleeping deeper than she had in months, knowing she wasn't alone, knowing someone else was listening, watching. For the first time forever, it wasn't just her and Shell against the world. At the hospital, life continued its pretense of normality, though the signs of fraying were increasingly evident. More power outages, supply shortages, patients arriving with conditions exacerbated by lack of medication. Still, viroflux and all its manifestations was ignored, which, of course, led to even more health problems. The three of them obsessively used nasal spray when they had to go out and about. Masks were no longer safe. You were just as likely to get attacked by the brainwashed as catch VF if you had no safeguard. Mercer remained scrupulously professional, though Claire sometimes caught him watching Lucinda when he thought no one was watching him. It was a Tuesday evening when Michelle came home late, her face white, hands shaking as she slammed the door behind her. "Shell?" Claire looked up from the inventory list she'd been updating. "What's happened?" Michelle paced the kitchen a few times before she could make herself speak. "I saw him, with a woman. She had that look." "Who did you see? What look?" "James, my brother. I haven't seen him in a couple of decades, not since I left home. You know the look I mean. That look." Claire knew fragments of Michelle's childhood, enough to understand why she'd cut ties with her family, why she never spoke of them. "Where did you see him?" "Outside the pharmacy." She was with him, young, pretty, frightened. She dropped something and flinched when he moved to pick it up. Michelle covered her mouth and squeezed her eyes shut. "I know that flinch. I invented that flinch." Lucinda appeared in the doorway, but said nothing. She'd been doing something with a screwdriver, apparently. It was still in her hand. "I followed them," Michelle continued. "They went for a coffee at that big place on the main street. I took the next table, and I heard him book a taxi for tomorrow morning. Airport run." Claire felt a chill. "Shell, what are you thinking?" Michelle's gaze was steady. "He needs to die before he leaves town." The words hung in the air as if they didn't know where to go. They'd not been spoken before in such stark and deliberate terms. "We could follow him," Lucinda suggested quietly. "Wait for an opportunity." Claire was shocked that Lucinda, with no prior discussion, was so accepting of the need to kill someone she knew nothing about. But she kept quiet. "There isn't time to follow him," Michelle said. "He'll be gone tomorrow, and then he'll carry on doing to her what he did to me, what our father did to me." Her voice wobbled. "What they do to women like us." "This is different," Claire said. "With Cockwombledok, with David, those were moments, opportunities, self-defense. This would be—" She was conscious of the sharp look Lucinda gave her. They'd never openly admitted his death was Claire's doing. "Murder," Michelle finished. "I know what it would be. I've thought about it for decades." Claire stared at her friend, steady, practical Michelle, who had taken her in without question, who had believed her about Cockwombledok without hesitation, who had never judged her for what she'd done. "We can't just walk into a cafe and kill someone," Claire said, trying to keep her voice level. We're not. Aren't we?" Michelle's eyes were like wet pebbles, and just as hard. "What's the difference between what you did and what I'm asking? Only that I'm being honest about planning it." The cold truth in Michelle's voice frightened Claire more than the anger. "There are other ways," she said. "We could warn the woman. We could get her away from him. And then what? Michelle demanded. I'll tell you what then. He'll find another woman. And another. Men like him always do. Lucinda suddenly spoke. Do you have any idea how many women are killed by men they know? By men who claim to love them? The statistics before the Ghost Day event were 1 every 3 days. Now, with systems failing, with police stretched thin, with the worst possible examples of male authority in all the positions of power, setting an example such that the vilest sides of humanity can feel legitimized. It's probably daily, at least. Of course, they don't bother keeping those records anymore. That doesn't make this right, Claire murmured. Doesn't it? Michelle challenged. When does it become right, Claire? When he's actually killed someone? When he's broken her bones? Or is it only justified when it's you he's threatening? Claire stood, hands flat on the table. I'm not saying we do nothing. I'm saying we think. We plan. We don't rush into something that could destroy us all. While we think and plan, she suffers, Michelle said, her voice flat. It's already been half an hour since I saw him. We've got to get going. And if we get caught, we all suffer, including every other woman we might have helped in the future. Claire took a deep breath. Let's at least do reconnaissance, see what we're dealing with, make a proper plan. Silence fell like a heavy blanket over the room. Finally, Michelle nodded. Fine. Plans. Reconnaissance. But, one way or another, he doesn't leave town tomorrow. As they gathered coats and supplies, Claire caught Lucinda watching her. What? She demanded. Nothing, Lucinda said. Just thinking about lines, how we draw them, how easily we move them. Claire thought of the bottle that, once again, since she'd refilled it from Shell's gardening supplies, weighed heavily in her bag. She thought of the bronze hair. She thought of the choices that had led her here. Maybe it's good to be adaptable, to have flexible lines, she suggested, uncertainty making her incapable of finishing her thought. As they left the house together, she wondered what Shell really had in mind. Claire spent the hurried journey from the house to the cafe, hoping James would have gone by now. But he was still there. She had expected a whispered strategy session, perhaps some reconnaissance from a safe distance. Instead, Michelle squared her shoulders and walked directly up to his table. Claire watched, frozen, as Shell approached one of the men who still haunted her nightmares. James. He looked up, looked away, sharply looked back again, and jumped to his feet. James was taller than Claire had imagined. He had Shell's eyes. The woman beside him, barely more than a girl, seemed to shrink when Michelle appeared, her gaze immediately dropping to her lap. Shelley? James's surprise quickly morphed into something else, accompanied by a strange smile that made Claire's skin crawl. Little Shelley? Well, not so little anymore. It's Michelle now, Shell said. Always trying to be something you're not, he laughed, then noticed Claire and Lucinda hovering nearby. And you've brought friends. How nice to know you have some. His eyes narrowed on Claire, and she felt a jolt of recognition pass between them. Wait, I know you, he said, pointing. You were that mousy little friend who was always hanging around. I've forgotten your name. Claire nodded mechanically, unsettled by how easily he'd placed her. She'd been very young when she'd last seen him, a terrified child witnessing things she hadn't understood at the time. What are you doing here, James? I thought you were never coming back. Michelle's voice was careful. Needed to see the old man. What a bonus to see my little sister, too. I mean, it's been, 20 years? His hand moved behind his companion's back. The woman winced but remained silent. This is Ellie. Ellie didn't look up. Claire recognized the posture of a woman trying to make herself smaller, trying to make herself unnoticed. She'd seen it so many times since she'd become conscious of the predatory nature of so many men. We're flying to Barcelona tomorrow, James continued, but I find myself a bit short. Now my little sister is here. She could help out her big brother. Michelle's expression flickered, so briefly that only someone who knew her well would notice. Claire caught it, the calculation behind her eyes, the momentary hardening before Michelle's posture changed. Her shoulders rounded forward, her gaze lowered. In seconds, she transformed into the frightened girl she must once have been. I don't have much, she whispered, her voice higher, smaller than usual. The transformation in Michelle was so complete that Claire found herself instinctively moving forward. Lucinda placed a restraining hand on her arm. James moved closer to his sister. But you have something. I know you. That big house our grandparents left you. I bet you've got plenty stashed away in there, and it's not far from here. I could give you what I have at home, Michelle offered, eyes still lowered. James smiled. That's more like it. That's my little Shelley. He gestured expansively. Lead the way. They began to walk toward Michelle's house. Claire and Lucinda exchanged quick glances. Right, so, all planning had to be on the hoof. They had to be alert, be flexible, take their chances. A sudden, shocking shaft of excitement pierced Claire's tension. It was all she could do not to show it, not to grin widely or shriek or clap her hands. She didn't know herself. Who's your quiet friend? James asked, nodding toward Lucinda. Lucinda, Michelle answered. She's staying with us for a while. Us? You and your little friend playing house? How sweet. The street seemed endless. Claire watched Michelle walking ahead with James. He kept one hand firmly on Ellie's arm, guiding her along like a reluctant doll. So Ellie, Claire attempted, hoping to establish some connection. How long have you? She's shy, James interrupted. Aren't you, darling? Ellie nodded. She didn't make a sound. Here we are, Michelle announced as they approached the house. Claire noticed her friend's hands didn't hesitate, didn't tremble at all as she unlocked the door. James pushed past her into the hallway, pulling Ellie with him. Always was a nice place. Looks expensive. His eyes scanned the entryway, lingering on the antique side table. The framed artwork. You've done well with it. Claire followed, Lucinda close behind. They'd entered the house dozens of times, but never like this. Never with this electric tension humming between them. Michelle led them all into the kitchen, where they'd spent so many evenings planning, preparing. James released Ellie and looked around as if expecting a maid to appear. So, where's this money then? Let's not waste time. Oh God, what was the plan? Surely, he had to have a drink so something could be put in it. Or maybe Michelle had the bronze hair in mind. It's upstairs, Michelle said. In my bedroom. I'll need to open the safe. I'll come with you, James said. We all will, Claire said. Whatever Michelle had in mind, she couldn't let her face James alone. James turned to her. You always were in the way, weren't you? I remember now, always hanging around where you weren't wanted. You can stay here. Nope. Claire stays with me, Michelle said. She knows where things are. Panic jolted through her. What did she mean? Did Michelle mean for her to bring the hair, or the poison, or what? James merely shrugged. Fine. Ellie will wait here with your other friend. Won't you, darling? Ellie nodded. Lucinda moved to the kitchen counter. I'll put the kettle on, she said. Make it quick, James instructed, because we want to get going. He gestured for Michelle and Claire to lead the way upstairs. As they climbed, Claire slowly put her hand in her bag to feel the bottle. She'd become so accustomed to carrying it that she barely noticed it anymore. Would they need it tonight? She wanted to be ready, just in case. Michelle's bedroom was at the back of the house, overlooking the garden. Claire had helped her reinforce the window frames, install the hidden compartments. Now she remembered she'd put the bronze hair on Shell's dresser too. He was a good luck symbol looking out for them. And a handy weapon, of course. She watched as Michelle knelt by the bed, her hands reaching beneath it. The safe is under here, she said. James hovered over her. Hurry up. It sticks sometimes. Michelle muttered, her movements slow. Claire, could you get the other light? This one's not enough to see the combination. Claire moved to the wall switch, her finger hovering over it. Briefly, she met Michelle's gaze. There was a signal. What's taking so long? James demanded, stepping closer to Michelle. Claire flipped the switch. The room plunged into darkness. What the? James began. There was a soft metallic click, followed by Michelle's voice, clear and hard. Don't move, James. Not if you want to keep breathing. The faint glow from the streetlight outside filtered through the curtains, just enough for Claire to make out Michelle rising from the floor, an unmistakable shape pointed directly at her brother's chest. Is that a gun? You wouldn't dare, he stated. Wouldn't I? Really? After everything you did? Claire stood still as stone by the light switch. Her heart hammered thunderously. This wasn't part of the plan. Or was it? Had Michelle always intended this? You're bluffing, James said, but he didn't move, and his voice was not nearly so certain. When I was 14, Michelle continued, her voice eerily calm, You held me down and told me that if I screamed, you'd kill me. Do you remember that, James? The silence stretched between them. Shell, Claire started, but a scream shattered the moment, high and terrified, coming from downstairs. Ellie's voice, followed by a crash of breaking glass. Lucinda. Claire gasped. In the split second of distraction, James lunged forward, colliding with Michelle. Claire heard the sickening thud of bodies hitting the floor, a grunt of pain, a strangled curse. Then, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot exploded through the darkness.